Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling George Orwell's Animal Farm,
Oh, yeah.
a satirical masterpiece that really kind of skewers communism. You've provided a treasure trove of sources.
A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, blending historical context on the Russian Revolution with literary analysis of Animal Farm and some really interesting insights into characterization.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're about to unpack how Orwell used talking animals to critique a real political system. And you might even sharpen your literary analysis skills along the way.
It's going to be fun. It's fascinating how Animal Farm acts as a bridge between a specific historical moment, a powerful political ideology, and this biting social commentary.
Right. It's like Orwell bottled a revolution and added a dash of talking pig for good
Yeah.
measure.
Yeah.
But before we get to the animals, I'm kind of stuck on this idea of communism itself. I know the basic idea is everyone contributes and everyone benefits equally.
Right.
But the source material paints a pretty bleak picture of what happened in the Soviet Union. Things went way beyond sharing is caring, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
While communism aims for a classless society with equal distribution of wealth,
Mm.
the reality, especially in the Soviet Union, was far more complicated.
Yeah.
The source mentions that before the Russian Revolution, there was this massive gap between the rich and the poor.
Mm.
Most people lived in poverty, while a select few enjoyed incredible wealth and privilege.
Oh, wow.
So the desire for change was intense.
Okay, so people were desperate for something different.
Yeah.
Enter the Russian Revolution, led by figures like Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky. They overthrow the Tsar, and bam, the Soviet Union, a brand new communist state, is born.
Right.
But then things get murky.
Yeah.
If communism is supposed to be all about equality, how did someone like Stalin end up with so much power?
That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question Orwell grapples with in Animal Farm. The source highlights how Stalin consolidated power, often brutally. He controlled information, demonized anyone who opposed him, and created a cult of personality. And after World War II, the Soviet Union's influence expanded, absorbing countries like Poland and Hungary. This expansion, as the source points out, created a lot of anxiety in the West about communism spreading.
So Animal Farm wasn't just a random story about talking animals. It was a direct response to this global tension and the unfolding realities of Soviet communism.
It makes me think of that saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Precisely. Orwell wrote Animal Farm in 1943, and it was published in 1945, right when these fears about communism were peaking.
Wow.
It was a timely critique of the Soviet Union under Stalin, but also a broader warning about the dangers of totalitarianism.
Hmm.
And he chose a very specific way to deliver that warning through satire.
The source material describes Animal Farm as a blend of satire, fable, and allegory, but that feels like a mouthful of literary terms.
It is, yeah.
Can you break that down for us a bit?
Think of it like a layered cake.
Okay.
Satire uses humor to expose flaws and hypocrisy.
Fables are stories, often with animals, that teach moral lessons. An allegory uses characters and events as symbols to represent abstract ideas or historical events. Animal Farm cleverly combines all three.
Okay, so the animals are like exaggerated versions of real life figures acting out a story that teaches us a lesson about power. And Orwell uses humor to highlight the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. And that humor often comes from the characters themselves.
The source material mentions direct and indirect characterization. Could you refresh our memory on those techniques?
Direct characterization is when the author tells us explicitly about a character.
Okay.
For example, the pig was greedy and manipulative.
Right.
Indirect characterization is more subtle.
Okay.
We learned about the character through their actions, words, thoughts, and how others react to them.
So with indirect characterization, we're piecing together clues to understand the character.
Precisely. And this is key in satire, where authors often use exaggerated characters to mock real-world figures or ideas.
The source mentioned a Key and Peele skit called Teacher Center as a modern example of this satirical characterization.
Yeah.
These guys are hilarious.
They're masters of the craft.
Yeah.
And that skit where they flip the script on how we value teachers compared to athletes perfectly illustrates how satire can use humor to expose societal issues.
Yeah.
It makes you think about our priorities, right?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder how Orwell might use stereotypes in Animal Farm to satirize certain groups or ideologies.
That's an astute observation. Remember, the source defines a stereotype as an oversimplified idea about a group of people often based on harmful assumptions. Orwell could be playing with those very stereotypes to expose their absurdity and danger.
That makes me think about the 5 stages of plot we reviewed from the source: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. It seems like each stage could be a way for Orwell to build his satirical message, showing how things unravel on the farm.
Absolutely. The plot structure itself becomes a tool for Orwell's satire. It's like watching a house of cards built on flawed principles, just waiting for the right breeze to topple it.
I can already sense the drama building. Without giving too much away, are there any key characters or moments from Animal Farm that really highlight those satirical elements?
Definitely. Think about the pigs, particularly Napoleon and Snowball.
Uh-huh.
They represent different approaches to leadership and ideology.
Yeah, Snowball strikes me as the more idealistic one focused on improving life for all the animals. He's the brains behind the windmill, which symbolizes progress and innovation.
Exactly. But notice how Napoleon uses manipulation and propaganda to seize control.
Oh, interesting.
The source material draws a direct parallel to how Stalin solidified his power, controlling information, turning people against his rivals, and creating a personality cult around himself.
That parallel is chilling. It's like those in power often exploit the very people they claim to represent.
That brings us to Boxer,
Hmm.
the hardworking horse whose motto is, "I will work harder." He embodies the dedicated working class, blindly loyal even when they're being exploited. The source mentions Stalin's policies led to a famine that killed millions, and those who disagreed with him were silenced or sent to labor camps. I wonder if we'll see any of that reflected in how the animals in power treat those who question them.
Now that you mention it, I'm getting nervous for Boxer. I have a feeling his unwavering loyalty might not end well.
Yeah,
And then there are the sheep, constantly bleating slogans like 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. They seem to represent the uncritical masses, easily swayed by propaganda.
precisely.
Yeah.
Orwell uses these characters to expose how those in power can exploit simple slogans and blind obedience to maintain control. It's like he's saying this can happen anywhere, anytime if we're not careful.
It's a stark warning about the dangers of not questioning authority and the responsibility we all have to think for ourselves. So, Animal Farm is clearly a cautionary tale about power, corruption, and the abuse of ideology. But what makes it such a lasting piece of literature? Why are we still talking about it almost 80 years later?
Because the themes Orwell explores, power, corruption, manipulation, the dangers of blind obedience, are universal and timeless.
It's like those themes are woven into human nature itself. No matter how much progress we make as a society, there's always the potential for these patterns to repeat.
Exactly. And that's why Animal Farm continues to resonate with readers today. It's a reminder to stay vigilant, to question those in power, and to challenge ideologies that limit individual freedom. It's not just about some animals on a farm, it's a reflection of ourselves and the societies we create.
You know, the source mentioned that Animal Farm was considered controversial when it was first published. Why was that? What made it so provocative in its time?
It's important to remember the political climate of the post-World War II era. The Soviet Union was a key ally during the war.
Right.
But afterward, tensions rose between the West and the Communist bloc.
So, Orwell's critique of Stalinism was seen as a direct attack on a wartime ally. That must have ruffled some feathers, especially among those who were sympathetic to communist ideals.
Exactly. Some critics accused Orwell of being anti-communist, while others argued that he was simply highlighting the dangers of totalitarianism, regardless of its ideological packaging.
It seems like he was walking a tightrope, trying to acknowledge the potential for positive change that communism offered, while also warning against the dangers of its execution, especially in the hands of a dictator like Stalin.
And remember, Animal Farm was published right at the dawn of the Cold War,
Right.
a period of intense ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union.
Wow.
So Orwell's book landed right in the middle of this global power struggle.
It's amazing how a seemingly simple story about talking animals became such a flashpoint for political debate.
That's the power of literature. It holds a mirror up to society, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths and challenge our own assumptions.
It's like Orwell was looking into a crystal ball and seeing our present. It's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
It is, but it's also a call to action. By understanding the lessons of the past, we can be better prepared to navigate the challenges of the present and future.
Okay, so we've explored the historical backdrop of the Russian Revolution and the rise of communism. We've dug into the satirical brilliance of Animal Farm, and we've uncovered the key characters and themes that make it such a powerful and enduring work of literature.
We've also touched on the importance of critical thinking, questioning authority, and recognizing the potential for manipulation in any system. These are vital skills not only for understanding Animal Farm, but also for navigating the complexities of our own world.
Absolutely. It feels like Orwell is giving us a toolkit to deconstruct those systems and examine the power dynamics at play. But before we send our listener off to tackle Animal Farm, what are some key things they should watch for? What will help them unlock those deeper layers of meaning?
Hmm. Pay close attention to the language.
Okay.
Orwell's prose is deceptively simple, clear, and direct.
Mhm.
But each word is carefully chosen to convey a specific message.
Oh.
It's like he's using plain language to unveil complex truths, like how those catchy slogans "this sheep repeat" actually mask a dark reality.
It reminds me of how propaganda often uses simple, memorable phrases to disguise a more sinister agenda. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, linguistically speaking.
Exactly.
Mm.
Also, notice how the animal's behavior shifts over time. How do their initial hopes and dreams for a better future become twisted and corrupted? Pay attention to the power dynamics on the farm.
Yeah.
It starts with this sense of unity, with all the animals united against their human oppressors. But then,
The cracks begin to show.
yeah,
Alliances fall apart. Suspicions grow. And the pigs gradually seize more and more power. It's a chilling reminder of how easily revolutions can go off track, and how those who claim to represent the people can become the very tyrants they initially opposed.
precisely. And that brings us to the ending. It's one of the most iconic and thought-provoking conclusions in literature.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to spoil it for our listener, but pay close attention to how the animal's revolution comes full circle.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about the cyclical nature of power and oppression?
It's like a snake eating its own tail. Orwell doesn't give us easy answers. He leaves us with a sense of unease, a warning that the potential for tyranny always exists, even in systems that claim to champion equality.
And that's why Animal Farm remains so relevant today. We see echoes of its themes in the rise of authoritarian leaders, the spread of misinformation and propaganda, and the erosion of trust in institutions.
It's a bit frightening how much Orwell's world mirrors our own, but as you said earlier, it's also a call to action.
Exactly. By understanding the patterns of the past, we can better equip ourselves to face the challenges of the present and future.
So, as our listener embarks on their own exploration of Animal Farm, we'll leave them with this. How do Orwell's warnings about power and corruption resonate in today's world? What systems or ideologies might be operating under the guise of equality while perpetuating injustice? And most importantly, what can each of us do to resist those forces and create a more just and equitable society? It's like Orwell is challenging us to be more than passive readers. He wants us to take those insights from the farm and apply them to our own lives.
He's calling on us to be active participants in shaping a better future.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those questions. Until next time, happy reading.